The vastness of space was silent, endless, and dark. It had always fascinated Daniel Carter. As an engineer and scavenger, he had seen things most people couldn't even imagine: abandoned ships, forgotten space stations, and even wreckage from long-forgotten wars. But nothing had prepared him for what he and his crew found that day. The distress beacon led them to an old alien vessel floating in the middle of nowhere, orbiting a dying star. The ship was massive, ancient, and lifeless. Its hull was covered in scars, as if it had survived battles long past. Carter's ship, the starbound Echo, slowly docked with the derelict craft. The crew consisted of 5 members: Carter, his pilot Jonas, medic Ilara, security officer Grant, and their newest recruit, Vera. They were all experienced in salvaging old ships, but something about this one felt wrong. "I don't like this," Jonas muttered as they suited up. "That distress signal has been running for too long. Feels like a ghost ship." "Every wreck is a ghost ship until we find something worth salvaging," Carter replied, locking his helmet in place. With a hiss, the airlock opened, and they stepped inside. The hallways were eerily silent, covered in dust and frost, untouched for centuries. Their flashlights flickered as they moved, revealing walls lined with strange alien markings. Then they found the first clue. Shadows burned into the floor. The shapes were humanoid, as if people had stood there and vanished, leaving only their dark outlines behind. It was as if the ship had been abandoned in an instant, the crew wiped from existence. Ilara shivered. What happened here? Radiation accident, Grant guessed, or maybe some kind of weapon. Carter felt something in the air, an uneasiness he couldn't explain. Then Vera's voice crackled over the radio. "Guys, I found something." They followed her voice and entered a sealed chamber deep within the ship. Inside was something unexpected, a large containment pod, glowing faintly. And inside it, a woman. She had silver-blue skin, glowing violet eyes, and long dark hair that floated weightlessly around her. She was dressed in a strange, elegant suit, unlike anything they had seen before. The most terrifying part: she was awake. Her eyes snapped open as they entered, locking onto them instantly. Her expression was a mix of fear and shock, as if she had seen ghosts. "She's alive," Vera whispered in disbelief. Before anyone could react, the chamber unlocked with a deep mechanical hiss. The pod's front panel slowly slid open. The woman stepped forward, her movements slow, almost hesitant. She looked confused, as if she wasn't sure whether she was dreaming. Then, suddenly, she reached out her hand. "Stop," Grant shouted, raising his weapon. But it was too late. Vera, the closest to the pod, reached out instinctively and touched the alien woman's outstretched hand. In an instant, Vera vanished. No sound, no struggle, no explosion. One moment she was there, the next she was gone. The only thing left behind was her shadow burned into the floor, just like the others they had seen earlier. A terrible silence filled the room. Ilara screamed. Jonas staggered back in horror. Grant raised his weapon, his hands shaking. What just happened?" he shouted. Carter stared in disbelief at where Vera had been. It didn't make sense. Then, he turned his gaze back to the alien woman. She was trembling, looking at her own hands with an expression of horror and guilt. I didn't mean to," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost broken. Grant, in a panic, raised his gun. "Stay back. Don't move." The woman stepped forward. Grant fired. The shot should have hit her, but it didn't. Instead, the bullet disappeared the moment it touched her. Then, in the blink of an eye, Grant vanished, just like Vera. The room erupted into chaos. Jonas and Ilara ran for the door, their instincts screaming at them to flee. But Carter, he didn't move. Something inside him told him to stay. The alien woman was now staring at him. Her eyes were filled with shock. "You?" she whispered. Why aren't you afraid?" Carter swallowed hard but didn't back away. He should have been terrified. He should have run. But something about the way she looked at him, so alone, so lost, made him hesitate. Then, slowly, he reached out his hand. Jonas and Ilara screamed at him to stop, but Carter ignored them. He needed to know the truth. His fingers brushed against her palm. And nothing happened. He was still there. The alien woman gasped, as if touching someone without making them disappear was unbelievable to her. "You can touch me," she whispered, eyes wide with stunned disbelief. For the first time in centuries, she was not alone. Carter stared at her. "I guess I can." The room fell silent. Outside, in the distance, something stirred within the ancient ship. And from the shadows, they were not alone. Carter's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He was still standing. He had touched her, and he was still here. No shadow burned into the floor, no eerie disappearance, just the strange alien woman staring at him in shock. "You can touch me," she whispered again, almost afraid to believe it. Carter didn't know what to say. He glanced at Jonas and Ilara, who stood frozen near the door, their faces pale with terror. "Carter, step away from her," Jonas shouted. "We have to get out of here." But Carter didn't move. His instincts told him something else was happening here, something more than just danger. The woman before him, tall, elegant, and otherworldly, did not look like a monster. Her glowing violet eyes were not filled with malice. Instead, they held fear, sadness, and a desperate kind of hope. She looked at his hand still touching hers and whispered, "This has never happened before." Carter frowned. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, a deep, metallic rumbling echoed through the ancient ship. The walls trembled, dust falling from above. Ilara gasped. "That sound, it's coming from the lower levels." Jonas checked his scanner, his face turning pale. "We are not alone on this ship." Carter turned to the alien woman. "What's happening? What else is here?" Her eyes darkened. "They are coming." A cold chill ran through Carter's spine. "Who?" The lights flickered. Then a loud metallic screech pierced the silence. Jonas and Ilara backed away toward the door, weapons drawn. "Carter, we need to leave now." But before they could escape, the ship's walls shifted, revealing hidden doorways opening all around them. And then they stepped out. Tall, armored figures, their bodies covered in dark, insect-like exoskeletons, with glowing red eyes and sharp, jagged weapons. The hunters had arrived. Ilara gasped. What are those things?" The alien woman stepped in front of Carter, her voice steady. "They are my captors. They have been hunting me for a long time." Jonas aimed his gun. "Well, they found you." The leader of the hunters stepped forward. Its voice was a deep, unnatural growl. "The Forbidden One must be returned. Surrender her, human, or be erased." Carter clenched his jaw. "You mean disappear? Like what happened to my crew?" The hunter tilted its head. "Yes." Ilara whispered, "Carter, we can't fight these things. We need to go." But Carter didn't move. His instincts were screaming. Something wasn't right. He turned to the alien woman. "Is it true? Did they do this to you? Are you the reason my crew is gone?" Her voice was soft, filled with regret. "I never wanted this. They made me into this. I am a weapon they cannot control. That is why they hunt me." The lead hunter growled. "She is dangerous. She does not belong among the living. Give her to us, and you will be spared." Carter looked at her, really looked at her. And for some reason, deep inside, he knew the truth. She was not the monster here. The hunters were. Carter's grip on his weapon tightened. "I don't abandon people. And I don't trust murderers in creepy armor." The hunters hissed in anger. "Then you will vanish as well." The leader lunged forward. Lazara, the alien woman, reacted instantly. She raised her hand. And the lead hunter disappeared in an instant, leaving only its shadow behind. The other hunters hesitated. Carter turned to Lazara in shock. "You can control it." She shook her head. "No, but they are not like you. They were never meant to exist in this time." More hunters rushed forward. Lazara's eyes glowed, and 2 more of them vanished. But the others were faster than she could react. A hunter slammed its massive clawed hand into Carter's chest, but he didn't disappear. Instead, he stumbled back, pain burning through his ribs. The hunter paused, looking at him as if confused. Carter growled, "Yeah, I don't vanish that easily." Jonas and Ilara opened fire, their weapons blazing. The energy blasts hit the hunters, but barely slowed them down. Lazara turned to Carter, desperation in her voice. "We need to leave." Carter nodded. "Agreed." Ilara threw a flash grenade, and the room exploded in bright light. The hunters hissed in pain. Carter grabbed Lazara's hand and ran. The group sprinted through the dark corridors, the sound of the hunters screeching behind them. Jonas shouted, "We can't outrun them forever." Carter turned to Lazara. "Can you stop them?" She hesitated. "Only if I stay behind. And if I do that, I won't see you again." Carter clenched his jaw. Not an option. They reached the airlock leading back to the starbound Echo. Jonas started punching in the override codes, but the doors were slow to open. The hunters were closing in. Lazara stepped forward, raising both hands. For a brief second, the entire ship trembled. Then, half the hunters disappeared. The remaining ones froze in fear. Lazara collapsed to her knees, her breathing ragged. Carter caught her before she fell. "I got you." Jonas shouted. "Doors open. Move." Carter lifted Lazara into his arms and ran. They jumped onto the ship just as Jonas slammed the airlock shut. Outside, the hunters let out a deafening screech as the starbound Echo disengaged and blasted away from the derelict vessel. Ilara gasped for air. "We're alive. We actually made it." Jonas turned to Carter. "And we brought her with us." Carter looked down at Lazara, still unconscious in his arms. "Yeah," he muttered, "and I have a feeling things are only going to get crazier from here." Outside, in the endless void of space, something watched their escape, and it was not pleased. The starbound Echo shot through space at full speed, leaving the ancient ship and the monstrous hunters far behind. The crew sat in tense silence, the hum of the engines the only sound in the air. Carter sat on the floor, his back against the cold metal wall. In his arms lay Lazara, the alien woman who had nearly collapsed after saving them. Her breathing was slow, her violet eyes closed, her silver-blue skin unnaturally pale. Jonas stood nearby, arms crossed. "I don't like this, Carter." Ilara knelt beside him, scanning Lazara with a medical device. "Her energy levels are unstable. Whatever she did back there, it nearly drained her completely." Jonas huffed. "That's not what I meant. She's dangerous. We saw what happened to Grant and Vera. She made them disappear." Carter clenched his jaw. "The hunters were trying to take her. I don't think she's the real threat here." Jonas shook his head. "She's still the reason our crew is gone." Carter exhaled, looking down at Lazara. He remembered the fear in her eyes, the way she had stared at her own hands as if they were weapons. She hadn't wanted to hurt anyone. And more importantly, her power didn't work on him. Why? Ilara adjusted her scanner, frowning. "This doesn't make sense." Carter raised an eyebrow. "What doesn't?" She turned the screen toward him. "Her body emits a strange energy field. It reacts with physical contact, causing people to disappear. But for some reason, it doesn't affect you." Jonas scoffed. Maybe because he's the most stubborn idiot in the galaxy. Carter ignored him. He flexed his fingers, remembering how it had felt to touch Lazara's hand. It had been warm, so impossibly warm after centuries of isolation. Suddenly, Lazara's fingers twitched. Then her eyes snapped open. She gasped, bolting upright, her breathing ragged. Her violet eyes darted around the room before landing on Carter. For a moment, she simply stared at him. Then, she touched his face. Jonas took a sharp step back. "Carter, don't let her touch you." But nothing happened. Carter felt her fingers on his skin, cool and trembling. No vanishing. No burning shadows. Just a real living person. Lizara's expression shifted from fear to wonder. "It's true," she whispered. Ilara's eyes widened. "She's testing you." Carter met Lizara's gaze. "Looks like I'm the only one you can't erase." Her fingers curled slightly before she pulled her hand away. "You are different." Carter nodded. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Lizara took a shaky breath. "I am sorry for your lost crew. I never meant to harm them. I did not choose this power." Jonas scoffed. "Convenient." Carter shot him a glare. "She didn't ask to be a weapon, Jonas." Lizara hesitated. "I was created, altered, by my own kind. They feared war was coming, so they made me into something that could protect them." Ilara's eyes widened. "But instead, you became something they couldn't control." Lizara nodded. "Anyone who touched me vanished. It frightened them. I was locked away, sealed in that ship, forgotten. Until you found me." Jonas sighed. "And now the hunters want you back." Lizara shuddered. "They do not want me back. They want me erased. Completely." Carter frowned. "If they created you, why destroy you?" Lizara's violet eyes darkened. "Because they are afraid I will learn the truth." Before anyone could ask more, the ship's alarms blared. Jonas turned sharply to the control panel. "We've got incoming. Fast." Carter helped Lizara to her feet. "Hunters." Ilara checked the scanners. "No, something bigger." The view screen flashed to life, revealing a massive warship dropping out of hyperspace. A deep mechanical voice echoed over the ship's comms. "Human vessel. Surrender the Forbidden One. You have 1 minute." Jonas cursed. "We can't outrun that thing." Carter glanced at Lizara. "Can you use your power to stop them?" She shook her head. "I am not strong enough. Not anymore." Ilara's hands tightened into fists. "Then what do we do?" Carter turned back to the screen, thinking fast. Then he smiled. "We do what humans do best. We improvise." The starbound Echo trembled as the massive warship loomed closer, its dark hull blocking the distant stars. The crew barely had time to catch their breath before the deep mechanical voice echoed through the comms again. "Human vessel. Surrender the Forbidden One. You have 30 seconds." Carter exchanged a quick glance with Jonas, Ilara, and Lizara. The situation was bad. They were outgunned, outmatched, and running out of time. "What's the plan, Carter?" Jonas asked, his hands gripping the ship's controls. "Because unless you've got a miracle, we're doomed." Carter smirked. "Miracles are a human specialty." Lizara, still weak from using her power, leaned against the control panel. Her violet eyes studied the approaching warship. "They will not hesitate to destroy us." Ilara's hands flew over the scanners. "I count multiple energy signatures charging up. They're getting ready to fire." Jonas cursed. "We don't even have shields strong enough to take a hit from those cannons." Carter's mind worked fast. They couldn't fight the warship, and running wasn't an option. They were already locked in its targeting range. Then an idea struck him. "Jonas, is the hyperdrive online?" Jonas blinked. Yeah, but we can't jump in this gravity well. The ship's pull will tear us apart." Carter's grin widened. "We're not jumping. We're using it for something else." He pointed at the view screen, where the warship's massive docking bay doors were beginning to open. "What if we use the hyperdrive to overload our engine's output? If we burn it just right, we can create an energy burst big enough to blind their sensors. Then we slip through their docking bay and out the other side before they even realize we're gone." Jonas's eyes widened. "That is the dumbest plan I've ever heard." Carter clapped a hand on his shoulder. "I know, but is it crazy enough to work?" Jonas sighed. Yeah, which makes me hate it even more. Lizara looked between them. You would risk your lives for me. Carter turned to her, his expression serious. That's what humans do. We don't leave people behind. Lizara's gaze softened, but there was something else in her eyes, something like hope. Ilara checked the countdown on the scanner. 15 seconds before they fire. Jonas cracked his knuckles. All right, let's break some rules. He grabbed the controls and pushed the engine core into overload mode. The ship's lights flickered as raw energy surged through the systems. Ilara strapped in. If this works, I'll buy you a drink. If it doesn't. Carter grinned. We won't be around to complain. The warship fired. At the same moment, Jonas hit the override switch. The starbound Echo exploded with speed, a bright burst of energy erupting behind them like a miniature sun. The warship's sensors were instantly overwhelmed, its targeting system thrown into chaos. Now, Carter shouted. Jonas pulled the ship up, and the starbound Echo shot straight toward the enemy's docking bay, slipping through before the massive doors could close. Inside the warship, alarms blared. Red lights flashed as crew members turned in shock, watching the small human ship weave through the giant docking area. Carter grabbed the comms. You guys really need better security. Then, before anyone could react, Jonas punched the thrusters. The starbound Echo blasted out the other side of the warship, disappearing into the darkness of space before their enemies could even lock onto them again. The comms crackled with an angry voice. Find them. They must not escape. But it was too late. The starbound Echo was gone. A moment to breathe. Silence filled the cockpit. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic hum of the ship's engines cooling down. Jonas exhaled loudly. Remind me to never do that again. Ilara laughed shakily. That was either the smartest or dumbest thing I've ever seen. Carter stretched his arms behind his head, grinning. That's just a normal day for me. Lizara, who had been gripping the side of her seat, slowly looked around. You actually did it. She turned her gaze to Carter. You escaped them. Carter shrugged. Told you. Humans are good at breaking expectations. Lizara's lips parted slightly, as if she was about to say something. But before she could, Ilara's scanner beeped. Jonas groaned. Please don't tell me there's another warship. Ilara frowned. No, this is something different. Lizara, I think it's scanning you. Lizara stiffened. What do you mean? Ilara turned the screen. There's an energy signature inside you that's fluctuating. It's different from before. Carter raised an eyebrow. Is she in danger? Ilara hesitated. I don't think so. But whatever power she has, it's changing. Lizara looked down at her own hands, her expression unreadable. I can feel it. Jonas muttered. Great, just what we need. More surprises. Carter placed a reassuring hand on Lizara's shoulder. We'll figure it out together. Lizara looked up at him, something new in her expression. Not just trust, but something deeper. Thank you, Carter. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then, Ilara cleared her throat. Not to ruin the moment, but we should figure out where we're going next. Jonas sighed. Anywhere that isn't full of creepy hunters and warships trying to erase us. Carter sat back, thinking. They had escaped, but it wasn't over yet. Somewhere out there, the hunters were still searching for them. And whatever power Lizara held, it was only getting stronger. And Carter had a feeling that their real battle was just beginning. The starbound Echo drifted through the dark void of space, its engines cooling after their dangerous escape. The crew sat in the cockpit, catching their breath. But the tension in the air hadn't faded. Lizara sat quietly near the console, staring at her hands. Ever since their escape, she had felt something different. Something inside her was changing. Carter watched her carefully. You okay? She didn't answer at first. Her glowing violet eyes flickered, almost as if they were pulsing with energy. Then she whispered, I don't know. Ilara checked her scanner again. Your energy signature, it's growing stronger. Whatever power you have, it's not just activating randomly anymore. It's evolving. Jonas groaned. Great, just what we need. Our passenger leveling up while an entire army is still hunting us. Carter shot him a look. She saved our lives, Jonas. Twice. Jonas threw up his hands. I know, but what if she loses control? We don't know what's happening to her. Lizara closed her hands into fists. Neither do I. Silence filled the cockpit. Then the comms crackled. Everyone tensed. A distorted voice came through. You cannot run forever. Jonas checked the scanner. No ships in range. Where's that signal coming from? Ilara's face went pale. It's being transmitted through subspace. They've already locked onto us. The voice returned, calm and cold. Return the Forbidden One to us. This is your final warning. Carter narrowed his eyes. Not happening. A long silence followed. Then, the voice said something that sent chills through them all. We do not need to find you. She will bring you to us. Lizara gasped, clutching her head. Her body shook violently, as if something invisible was pulling her. Carter grabbed her shoulders. Lizara, what's happening? Her voice was strained. They are trying to take me. Ilara ran a scan. They're using some kind of resonance pulse to trigger her power remotely. If they succeed, Jonas swore, she'll disappear, and maybe take all of us with her. Lizara's body trembled as a soft glow surrounded her. The air around her shimmered like a heat wave, unstable and dangerous. Carter tightened his grip on her shoulders. Fight it. You don't belong to them. Her eyes flickered wildly. I can't. Stop it. Carter took a deep breath. He had no idea what he was doing, but he knew one thing. He was immune to her power. So he did the only thing that made sense. He wrapped his arms around her. Jonas shouted, Carter, what the hell are you doing? The energy around Lizara flared, but Carter held on. Her body stiffened. Then, slowly, her breathing steadied. The glow dimmed. The tremors stopped. Ilara checked her scanner. The resonance signal is breaking. She's overriding it. Jonas let out a breath of relief. I can't believe that worked. Carter pulled back slightly, still holding onto Lizara's arms. You okay? She looked at him, her violet eyes full of emotion. You saved me again. Carter smiled. Told you, humans don't leave people behind. Before she could respond, the ship shook violently. Jonas spun toward the console. Guys, we've got a bigger problem. A massive energy signature appeared on the scanner. Ilara paled. No way. They found us. Outside, space rippled like water. And then, emerging from the void, a colossal warship appeared. The same warship they had barely escaped from before. Carter clenched his jaw. They didn't need to track us. They used Lizara to slow us down long enough to catch up. A new voice filled the ship's comms. This time, it wasn't distorted. It was calm, almost cruel. You have something that belongs to us. Surrender now. Lizara tensed. That voice. Carter turned to her. You know them. She nodded slowly, fear flickering across her face. That is High Commander Valek, the one who ordered me to be erased. Jonas shook his head. We're out of tricks, Carter. There's no escape this time. Ilara swallowed hard. They're charging weapons. Carter looked at Lizara. Is there any way you can use your power against them? She hesitated. I don't know if I have enough strength left. Carter placed his hands on her shoulders. You don't have to do it alone. She blinked. What? Ilara's scanner beeped. Wait. That's it. Lizara's power is based on connection, on touch. If Carter is immune, maybe he can act as a stabilizer. Jonas frowned. Are you saying Carter should just hold her hand and hope we don't vanish? Ilara nodded. It's risky, but if he can help her control the energy. Lazara slowly reached out to Carter. I trust you. Carter took her hand without hesitation. A surge of heat rushed through him. The energy crackling around her calmed. The power wasn't wild anymore. It was focused. Outside, the warship's weapons locked onto them. Valak's voice returned. Final warning. Carter turned to Lazara. Let's give them something to be afraid of. She nodded. Her eyes glowed brighter than ever before. And then, with a single pulse of energy, the impossible happened. The massive warship vanished. Not destroyed. Not exploded. Just gone. Carter's heart pounded. Did you just? Lazara staggered, her breathing heavy. I didn't erase them. I moved them to another part of space. Jonas blinked. You mean you just teleported a warship? Ilara stared at the empty void where the enemy had once been. That's impossible. Carter caught Lazara as she collapsed against him. She looked up at him, exhausted but smiling. Not impossible. Just unexpected. Carter laughed, holding her steady. That's what humans do best. Lazara's smile widened. Maybe that's why I can touch you. For the first time, she didn't feel like a weapon. She felt free. The starbound Echo drifted in the vast emptiness of space, its crew still recovering from the impossible event that had just occurred. Lazara, the alien woman who had once been feared as a weapon, had just teleported an entire warship away, saving them from certain destruction. But now, she lay weak and exhausted in Carter's arms, her violet eyes half open, struggling to stay conscious. Carter gently held her, worry in his eyes. Lazara, are you okay? She gave a weak nod, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know I could do that. Ilara, still staring at the scanner in disbelief, muttered, no one should be able to do that. Jonas rubbed his face. Forget running. If she can do that again, we won't need to run anymore. Carter shot him a look. She's not a weapon, Jonas. Jonas sighed. I know. But Carter, what she just did, that changes everything. Lazara slowly sat up, with Carter helping her. I moved them, she said softly. I didn't destroy them. I sent them somewhere far away. Ilara checked her scanners. I'm picking up traces of energy fluctuations where the warship used to be. It's like space itself was folded. Carter turned to Lazara. How did you do that? She looked at her hands. I don't know. I always thought my power was meant to erase things, but maybe it was never about destruction. A silence filled the room. Jonas leaned back in his chair. So what now? We might have bought ourselves some time, but those guys will be back, and they won't come alone. Ilara nodded. They know she's more powerful than they thought, and now that she's with us, they'll see us as a threat. Carter exhaled. Then we don't wait for them to find us. Jonas frowned. You're suggesting we go on the offensive. With what? This ship barely has weapons. Carter smirked. No, we don't fight them. We outsmart them. Lazara looked at him, curiosity in her eyes. You have a plan. Carter nodded. You said you were created right, changed by your own people. Lazara hesitated. Yes, I was an experiment. A failed one. That's why they locked me away. Carter leaned forward. Then there's a place where all of this started, a place where they learned how to manipulate your power. Lazara's eyes widened as she realized what he was saying. You want to find the research facility. Jonas blinked. Wait, what? Why would we go straight to the people who made her? Ilara caught on quickly. Because if they created her, they might also have information on how to stop the hunters from tracking her. Carter nodded. Exactly. We need answers, and that's where we'll find them. Lazara hesitated. It will be dangerous. Carter grinned. Since when has that ever stopped us? Jonas groaned. I really hate it when he says things like that. Ilara pulled up the star charts. All right, if we're doing this, we need to figure out where the facility is. Lazara closed her eyes, focusing. I was taken to a hidden station, far from any major system. I don't remember the exact coordinates, but I do remember something. Carter leaned in. What is it? Lizara opened her eyes. The station was orbiting a dying sun. Jonas whistled. That narrows it down. There are only a few dying stars in this sector. Ilara quickly ran a scan through the database. After a moment, her screen flashed. Got something. There's an abandoned research station orbiting the dying star known as Vetra 9. No records of who built it or why. Carter smirked. That's our destination. Lizara's fingers tightened slightly. And if we find out something we don't want to know? Carter met her gaze. Then we decide what to do with it, together. She stared at him for a long moment before nodding. All right, let's go. Jonas sighed, setting the coordinates. Next stop, creepy abandoned lab. I hate this job. Carter chuckled. You love this job. Jonas muttered. That's the problem. The starbound Echo turned and shot into hyperspace, heading toward Vetra 9, the place where Lizara's mystery began, and possibly the place where they would find the truth about what she really was. But what they didn't know was that someone else was already waiting for them. In the darkness of space, hidden from sight, a small, cloaked vessel received their transmission. Inside, a figure in dark armor watched their ship disappear into hyperspace. A small smile formed. So, the experiment survived. The transmission cut, and the ship followed them into the void. The starbound Echo emerged from hyperspace near Vetra 9, a dying sun burning dimly against the backdrop of endless space. The station orbited close to it, a massive, dark structure, abandoned and lifeless. At least, that's how it seemed. Carter sat in the pilot's chair, studying the station. There it is. Looks like no one's home. Jonas huffed. Yeah, because creepy abandoned labs are always empty. Ilara's fingers moved over the scanner. No life signs, but there is power running through the station. Something is still active inside. Lizara stood near the window, staring at the place where she had once been a prisoner. A place where she had been turned into something more than herself. Carter glanced at her. You sure you want to do this? Lizara's glowing violet eyes met his. I need to know the truth. Carter nodded. Then let's find out. Landing on the forgotten station, the ship docked with a loud hiss, the airlock sealing with a heavy clang. The inside of the station was cold and dark, the metal walls covered in frost. Their boots echoed as they moved down the corridors. Jonas kept his weapon ready. I don't like this. Feels like something's watching us. Carter led the way, Lizara beside him. As they walked, lights flickered on, one by one, as if the station was waking up. Ilara checked a terminal. There's a central database in the control room. If we can access it, we might learn what really happened here. Lizara nodded. I remember. It's this way. She led them deeper into the station, memories flooding back, cold metal tables, scientists whispering, the fear in their eyes every time they came near her. They reached the main lab, a massive room with glass pods lining the walls. Some were shattered. Others still had alien remains inside. Jonas winced. Well, that's unsettling. Ilara found the terminal and activated it. The screen flickered, showing old logs and encrypted files. It'll take time to decrypt these. Carter turned to Lizara. Do you remember what they were trying to do to you? She hesitated. They told me I was made to protect our people, but they lied. Ilara's fingers moved quickly over the console. Then, suddenly, the logs unlocked. A hologram appeared, showing a scientist with a tired, haunted expression. Project Exile. We were wrong. She was never meant to protect us. She was meant to replace us. Lizara's breath hitched. Replace. The recording continued. We believed we could create a new evolution, one that could control space itself. But we failed. She is not a warrior. She is not a soldier. She is a being of pure energy, a bridge between dimensions. That is why she erases things, not because she destroys them, but because she moves them between realities. Carter's eyes widened. That explains how you teleported the warship. Lizara stared at her hands, realization dawning. I was never meant to erase people. I was meant to open pathways between worlds. Jonas groaned. That's great and all, but what do we do with this information? Before anyone could answer, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the room. You don't do anything, because none of you are leaving. They spun around, and standing at the entrance was a dark armored figure, a hunter unlike the others. Lizara stiffened. Valek, the high commander of the hunters, stepped forward, his red eyes glowing behind his helmet. You have become more than I expected. Forbidden One. Carter stepped in front of Lizara. If you want her, you'll have to go through us. Valek tilted his head. That is not necessary. She will come willingly. Lizara clenched her fists. Never. Valek raised a hand, and suddenly the walls trembled. Energy crackled around him. You do not understand, girl. Your existence threatens the balance of this galaxy. Your power could undo reality itself. Carter smirked. Funny, she's been using it to save lives, while you've been using it to erase them. Valek's voice grew colder. You are foolish to stand in her defense, human. She is not one of you. She never will be. Carter glanced at Lizara, then back at Valek. She's not a weapon. She's not a monster. She's Lizara. And I don't abandon my crew. Lizara's eyes filled with emotion. This was the first time someone had fought for her, not because they feared her, but because they believed in her. Valek took a step forward. Then you will fall with her. The air shook as he prepared to attack. But this time, Lizara didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, raising her hands. No more running. A bright pulse of energy erupted from her body, pushing Valek back. His armor cracked, and for the first time, his voice held surprise. Impossible. Lizara's eyes blazed with power, but this time, it was controlled. Focused. I am not your weapon, and I will never be erased again. With a final push, she sent Valek disappearing into the void. The room fell silent. Jonas whistled. That was intense. Lizara turned to Carter, breathing hard. I finally understand. My power isn't about destruction. It's about creating new possibilities. Ilara smiled. Then maybe it's time to choose your own path. Lizara looked at Carter, something soft in her gaze. And maybe I already have. Carter grinned. So what now? Lizara smiled. We find out what's next. Together. As the starbound Echo left the station, Lizara looked ahead, not as a prisoner, not as a weapon, but as someone finally free. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what the future held. She was ready.